So, good afternoon, Tracy Fahey and Justin Park. Welcome to Alice in Gothic Land. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Tracy, for coming as well again today after your vaccine.
I'm absolutely delighted to be back again.
Oh, it's so nice. Well, we've got a bit of a different program today. This section I've called it talking to the author, but really it's going to be today talking to the author and the man who makes things possible, and all things horror. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, Justin, and a bit Tracy? I always like to do a bit of intro because of people that may not have seen other videos before. So tell us a little bit about who you are, and then Tracy, let's do the same.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. As you point out, my name is Justin Park. So I do a couple of different things in the horror world. One of the things is I write my own horror books. I write them under the name J.R. Park, just a slight change in my name to kind of keep things separate from other professions in my life. And I also run a publishing company called the Sinister Horror Company. We've been going for 6 years now. I say we. It started off with me as a couple of people, but it's effectively just me now that runs the company with a few people that kind of help alongside. But yeah, we've released I think over 50 titles within those 6 years, and still going strong. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. And then there's a couple other little bits I do on the side as well. One of the most recent ones has been filmmaking. So we've done a couple of films just recently, with a new film just finished in January, which is nearly ready to try and go to distributors. So keep yourself busy.
Yeah, because you have been like these one-man band sometimes. Yeah, when I read about your profile, it's like, that's interesting. He does all that himself, So yeah, that's really nice. Okay, thank you. So Tracy, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, well, I'm less of a one-woman band. I'm primarily a writer and academic, and just in terms of, I suppose, both my huge interest, like you, Alicia, is Gothic, and I've written 3 short story collections, 1 mini collection, and 1 novel, with more projects brewing in the pipeline.
Right, very good. So I suppose you're both having plans for next year? Well, we'll talk about that later if you want. I'm just going to change the screens for a bit. I don't want to give spoilers already. I'm going to change the screen to show these. Okay, let's hide a few things there on the side. Right. So this is what we're doing today for people who want to know. There you go, interview with the author. We are in Alice in Gothic Land. I didn't have better pictures or other pictures. I like them. But if you wanted to give me extra pictures for later on, you can just feel free to do so. So yes, so interview with the author and the man behind it. This is a joke. Talking to Tracy one day, because we were talking about stories, and I always tell about my ideas of writing, and I'm trying to write with it. I'm trying to get with people to write things, and that came up in conversation. So so it was a bit her own words, her own idea. So yes, and I put here your company. There you go, Justin. So I'm giving you a little bit of advertisement here.
Oh yeah, thanks. I love the branding. Get that everywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what we have is, I would like to talk first about this one, because this is the last thing, that you have released. So I would like to know how you feel now after all the launch, and has been a lot of work, because this is going to take us to the next part of the interview. So are you happy with it? Is it doing well? How's the book doing? Because I've got the book finally. I got it finally. It went all over the world. I think I ordered it from the UK and it went back to the States, and I'm like, I can't believe I'm late, even though I had a little bit of a sneak because Tracy sent me some stuff earlier on. But I wanted to have the physical book. So how's it doing, the sales?
Well, I guess I'd answer that, and we're not yet. It's doing very well. We are. What it's nice to see is there's a lot of good comments coming around and good reviews, great reviews coming out for it. I'm seeing a lot of social media posts, and what's really interesting is I'm seeing a wider range of an audience checking out the book. Some people that I've not seen before, that doesn't usually come into our sort of horror strand, and also people that like different types of horror have been intrigued with this one to pick it up, which is great, because it's always great to sell to a particular niche, but if you're doing something that's intriguing and getting a wider audience, then that's fantastic. But I think a lot of that has been down to Tracy as well, because she's been absolutely brilliant at going out and finding interesting places to promote the book.
Oh, fantastic! So, are you happy with what's happening with the book, Tracy, so far?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this one, because this one was a real passion project that I've been incubating for a couple of years, because I always liked to write. I suppose it's more Gothic fiction than straight horror fiction. So this one, I feel, of all my books, is kind of fitting into maybe a couple of categories, and it's primarily kind of body-based, kind of female collection, and again, because I'm really interested in interiority in every way. I'm very interested in what is beneath the surface, and I'm very interested in kind of concepts like memory, like illness, and yeah. So, but also, I guess this one is really quite connected with the female experience, and that idea of terrors that kind of arise from the fact of being female, from inhabiting a female body. And I've been really touched and amazed, as Justin mentioned, that a lot of the early reviews that come in were actually from male readers who very much seemed to connect with it. I did an interview with Kit Power and R.J. Barker recently, and Kit talked about one of the short stories in it, Becoming, which is a perimenopausal story and kind of a biomedical story. And it was very interesting because he said that kind of from his own perspective, because we're a similar age, that he found a lot of the stuff there really resonated. So yeah, that was really interesting and exciting, I guess. And I think it was just last week on Twitter, Lucy McKnight Hardy mentioned that she was reading it, and I was just totally bowled over because her book, Water Shall Refuse Them, was one of my favourite reads recently. So.
Wow! No, I've been listening to, as you said, there's been lots of reviews, and I've been reading all the articles that people have been coming up with and commenting your book and everything. I'm thinking, damn, I'm going to be the last one. I can't believe it, because I'm a slow reader and I need to chew it up a little bit. But yeah, everything, as you said, a lot of men commenting, and I thought this is great because, there was, I can't remember his name, but he was saying it's not just a book for women. If you want to identify, every man should read it. Every woman should definitely read it, but men should read it too, to see this other side that we might not be aware of. And I thought that was wonderful because it's true, isn't it? It's got this horror touch. It's Gothic, but it's got horror touch, because some of the parts, I have to say, you always talk to my brain, but at the same time, this aimed a lot to my own heart and my own experiences with motherhood and childbirth and losing children in the way, because I had a couple of miscarriages. And I thought, wow, I don't know if I'm ready to read this, but I read them and I thought, yeah, it's just like that. And part of it is like this, and other moments of the process is different because we all live through these things from a different point of view. And also, it's something I always feel that with you, Tracy, that I'm not sure if it's something that you've gone through yourself, but if you haven't, it's like, wow, the levels of empathy that you have with certain problems is amazing. I would say you can't speak about certain things if you don't go through them, but I think you have this high level of empathy. I don't know if Justin agrees as well with me in that sense.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, yeah, when you're reading through this, it's kind of like you are transported into that position. You know, from a male point of view, reading these female experiences, I'm living through them when I'm reading the stories. And when we were finalising the collection, and I was editing them as I was going, I would send a message over after every story to Tracy, and I'd be like, "Wow, that's great, that one," or "Wow, that's even better than the next one." And there'd be a few times where I turn around and go, "Right, now I'm crying. Thanks very much."
Yeah.
That's always a very special moment of triumph, Justin.
Making me cry, right?
Well, I guess every author makes the editor cry from time to time. It's just nice when it's, with empathy instead of with rage.
If your purpose, as you say in the beginning of the book, your purpose is one of them is to talk about identity. I think you definitely achieved that. So
I guess I'm kind of obsessed with identity. It comes up in every single thing that I put, because I think, first of all, like my kind of big fear, I guess, in life is when identity starts to dissolve, when you're uncertain as to what you want, when you're uncertain as to who you are.
Yeah.
And that kind of ran through very much my first collection, the Unheimlich Maneuver, because it was fear of home, which is paradoxically the place you're meant to feel most safe. And then the subsequent collection, it was kind of almost fear of your own culture and history. Oh my God, you're so good. Preparation. And that also runs through the Girl in the Fourth. And I guess it's when kind of family and kind of heritage becomes quite liminal as well, because all of a sudden what you thought you knew starts to disappear. So for this book, it was, I suppose, the most interior horror of all. It's, what happens when your body betrays you, like what happens when your kind of emotions kind of plunge you into these abysses. It was, I guess it was I guess it's kind of the ultimate in horror, really, because external horror doesn't really fascinate me. It's internal horror all the time. And what is more internal and more precious to us than our own selves? So, yeah.
It's a great book. I think I found that maybe it's more mature than the others somehow. I've been dreaming about it. I normally read at night because it's when I can taste the book better, because my kids leave me alone, and there's no other noises or duties in the house. Is when I can enjoy it really, But this one has had some stories that made me really uncomfortable, and then I slept on them, and then I wanted to read more, and I thought, yes, that's the thing. That's what you want, and this addiction that you create. But I think this book has got something extra that the others already had, but this one is like more defined. That's my perception. I might be wrong. I don't know if it's because it's pink or but it's just the first story, and then the beginning and the end is very well. I think they're very well put together as well. The way, I know that you're very careful, Justin, when you decide the order of the stories, because I've heard you in other interviews, and you're very careful on which one goes first and next, and so there's a balance. And I think they kind of connected between them. I don't know if I'm hallucinating or I'm just, but I see like sometimes like maybe there are resonances from one story to another, and almost like they could be the continuity. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I'm not going to take any credit for the order of this book. This is entirely Tracy's. I mean, I'm really particular about getting an order and getting a flow right, and it has to be right in an anthology or a collection. With I Spit Myself Out, it's very much a work of art which Tracy has poured herself into and spent many a year creating these stories. But as she sent them over to me to edit, she'd already sent them in order, so already decided a long time. Well, I'm not sure how long ago, but some time, how they would all link and how they would all fit together.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Can I just say that Justin is literally the best editor that I've ever worked with, and apologies to all the other ones, but really, Justin recognizes my inner control freak when it comes to story collections. And I guess because we co-edited before with the Blackroom Manuscripts 4, I find Justin very easy to work with because I can almost hear his voice in my head. He taught me such a lot about story order, kind of working with him. Justin, I still learned those lessons. That's why you didn't have to mess that much when I sent over these ones. But he taught me some great tips, like the first story should be reasonably short because it needs to hook kind of somebody in. He taught me about where you can place kind of longer stories, how to mix the mood. He often refers to it as the art of creating a mixtape. Do you want to expound a bit more on that, Justin?
Well, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's the same as like when, back in the day when you were making a mixtape and you sit there and you record a load of tunes for somebody, and you very much think about, you'd have moods that would play into each other, one that could flow into the next, but then other times you would have it where it would be a juxtaposition, a quiet song next to a loud song and then back to a quiet again. And it's very similar in that kind of sense when you're doing a collection. It has a flow, and you need to make sure that you get that flow right. You need to hook people in, and then you don't want to exhaust them by having really long stories put next to each other, or ones that's really going to use the brain power too much, and what you need some light relief as well in those heavy places. And so it's just all thinking about that flow as you get towards the end.
I have to say that was a massive insight for me, because I realized that the goth boys used to make tapes for me when I was a teenager. Put a lot more thought in than I'd previously anticipated. I didn't realize it was such an art form.
Such an art, absolutely.
So this is nice because it's going to take us to, I'm going to put the here now. It's going to take us to the how and when did you meet? So how did all this thing and working together start?
Yeah, so we met, it was at a convention, wasn't it? It was at FantasyCon?
It was Peterborough, so that was FantasyCon.
Yes, so that was 2017?
Yeah, because the first one I went to was 2016. So
right, okay, yeah. Yeah, so 2017, FantasyCon, which was a convention, it was held in Peterborough that year, because it's held in different places all over the UK each different year. And it's a place where a lot of fantasy, horror and science fiction writers go. It's a convention, you get writers and publishers there. There's an award ceremony that happens at the end of it. And I think in that one, Tracy, I think the Unheimlich Maneuver in its original release with Boo Books, was it up for an award that year?
It was, yeah. I lost out very honourably to Adam Neville, who's obviously a titan. I remember thinking it was really funny because I was up against Stephen Volk, who's like the great grandmaster of horror, Adam Neville, and I think it was Joe Abercrombie. I just kind of read the list and laughed. But yeah, no, it was fantastic convention. They are really the lifeblood of kind of writers, because they offer a chance for everybody to meet up, start talking. And I've had a lot of kind of collaborations that have come out of those, and kind of invitations for anthologies, things like that. But meeting Justin was just really transformational now, I have to say, for my kind of subsequent kind of publications.
Yeah, I mean, we met up with it because I actually went that year. I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't launching anything. I went just as a punter, just as someone to go in and just kind of network and meet up with old friends and new friends alike, and that kind of sort of thing. Met Tracy that first time because we were actually at a convention earlier in the year, but our paths never crossed. So we never met at that one, which was Edgelit, which was when the Unheimlich Maneuver was released. But when it was released, the publishing company Boo Books that had released it folded, I think, pretty much on the same day that the book got released. It was pretty close. It was
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. So Tracy had this book. It was a limited edition. It come out. People had bought it. People had really liked it. It was up for an award, but you couldn't buy it anywhere. And I remember I was chatting with her, and my first thought was, just release it yourself. Why don't you? If you want to, I'll show you how to release it if you like, and you can go release it yourself. And Tracy was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to go through the publisher.
I just pulled a face, and I said, I do enough admin in my kind of ordinary job. I really, when it comes to writing, I just want to write. I don't want to worry about the other stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think, Justin, I sent you a copy of the book because I was like, well, have a read of it and see if it might fit your bill. And I wasn't sure if it would. But then he read it and decided that, yes, he would like to bring it out. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Sinister Horror Company, we release so many different types of horror. The one thing that connects the brand is quality. That's it. But we go from like really toe-curling extreme to comedy horror to really quiet, gentle stuff to all over the place. And when I read Tracy's, I hadn't really read that brand of horror before, so it was something completely new to me. And you mentioned about the fact of like when you stop reading a story and it lingers in your brain afterwards. Tracy's an absolute master at that, and I'd put the story down and I'd be thinking about it. It wouldn't go away. I'd be like, "Oh, how'd you do that?" It was like alchemy. I spent a long time. I still don't quite know how she does it, but I absolutely loved it. So of course, then I went back to Tracy and was like, "Yeah, I'd really love to put this out." So there was so she sent over manuscripts, and there was a conversation, a couple of changes that we were going to do from one version to the next, because we had the time that we could do that.
Yeah.
And that worked well. So then after that, we just carried on kind of working together. Tracy would come over and to conventions and would help out at the Sinister Horror Company stand every now and again, because it gets a bit boring when you're sat there by yourself. But if you've got someone to help out, which is always nice. But yeah, and we also we then worked together on, so the Sinister Horror Company did an anthology called the Blackroom Manuscripts. Yeah. And it was an anthology that all proceeds would go off to a charity, and each volume would be a different charity. And it was a way of kind of sort of showcasing talent and getting people together and that sort of thing. And we were going to do the fourth in the last one. And we had like different people editing them. I'd already edited one to myself, and the other two people from the Sinister Horror Company at the time had edited one each. So by the time it came to this fourth one, I didn't just want to edit it myself because it would be the same flavour. And Tracy writing this different style of horror that I'd not encountered before, but I loved. But well, there you go. Let's get somebody with a completely different lens, as it were, to help co-edit it with me. Yeah. So Tracy did come in and learn a little bit about the admin side. Not too much, but there were spreadsheets, I think.
Oh my God, Justin, there's always spreadsheets with you. Justin is like a living Excel document.
But it seems like it kind of rolled. It was kind of natural, the whole process, which is really nice, isn't it? Sometimes you try to force a relationship, or you're trying to force your book or your story, and sometimes that doesn't work. But in other times, things just kind of flow. And it's just right, isn't it? And it obviously proved right that you've done the right.
I have to say, Justin's a bit of an alchemist. He's really, really good, not just at being the second pair of eyes and reading over, but he's a very intuitive reader. He always gets what I want to do, and I think this is particularly kind of illustrated by the covers, because he's designed the covers for the Unheimlich Maneuver and Unheimlich Maneuvers in the Dark and I Spit Myself Out. Yeah. And, that's a really tricky thing, trying to visualize the essence that someone wants to create.
Because people I see it again.
There we go. There's the babies.
Yeah.
I don't have any hands,
The family.
Yeah, it's great. No, it's nice to have the same line, same similar style for the 3 covers, and it's simple but effective. It's like I'm like with covers. I suppose like many people, for me it would be trees, right? If I think of a cover for my book, it'd be trees and dark trees and branches twisting and all that. But I like these, I really like them because I think, it's what you say, it captured the essence of what the stories are saying. And I don't know, it's beautiful. How to do that on a cover
well, people judge books by covers. That's just a fact, isn't it? We know that, and in today's day and age, when people are buying books, they're buying them predominantly online, especially in COVID times as well. Yeah. And so a book cover on a bookshelf is like that. And Amazon, it's that big, right? It's a little thumbnail, so it becomes even more important that the image is something that's going to be striking and pull you in. So you've got to have that in mind, but at the same time, it's also got to be representative of the contents inside. That book is a work of art. The inside and the outside have to represent each other, just like an album cover would. It's got to pull people in the right way. And it's not. But both of them. Particularly, I spit myself out. I think I mocked up about 6 or 7 different designs, going in really different directions before we actually settled on that final cover, where I kind of went, do you know what? Let's go back to the original, the Unheimlich maneuver, and let's take that design and let's do something along those sort of lines from there. And even once we started doing that, it's always back and forth. It was like, right, this is the rough idea of the design. Do you like it? Oh yeah. What if we just move this here, turn this around here, move that round? That's how I kind of like to work, because the author spent all that time writing all those stories. They have spent hours, days, months, years sometimes creating these bits of work. You want to make sure that product is exactly right. If you flicker through the book, you'll see there's these little figures.
I know, I noticed that.
Yeah. So those
let's show them to people.
There we go. So those little figures, I designed those to put in there. Now, the first time we put them in, we had them in a certain height, and I'm like, I think that's breaking it up too much. Is that right or wrong? Not sure. Send it over to Tracy. We went back and forth. I think we had 3 different or 4 different heights. And on the last one, I put them all in at one height. And then we decided, no, it just needed to be that much more smaller. And it was about two hours, probably a bit more work trying to reform all that again. But it was worth it, because if you don't get it right, it's not going to look good.
It's true, because at the point I thought, is it going to be overwhelming, all the little ladies here? But no, it's balanced.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess what you mean, because it's beautiful, but then it's like risky. What, I've never seen anything. You always see like a little flower or something in some cases, like a little something, but a little person there, it's not horizontal, it's vertical as well, which takes more space, and it's risky. I think it's a risky choice, but I think it works really well, because it's exactly the image that we have in the cover, and with the broken person. Using the broken design, which is the same lightning crack which is on the Unheimlich. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's beautiful, very clever.
But also, can I say, like, Justin also came up with the idea of this kind of pink background, which is like a braided skin, or kind of, because actually quite a few of the stories are about skin, because skin's really important to me. It's the final frontier between who we are and who we're not. It represents that boundary. So a lot of the stories are to do with fissures and kind of tears and kind of just kind of complexities in the skin and beyond. So there's that idea of disruption that kind of comes into it with this mottled color, and even on the lips themselves, there's this kind of cracking. There's this sense of, I guess, physical instability. And again, this is part of Justin's genius. When he reads something, he has this visual as to how it should be, or how it can be translated into images. And I have to say, like, the first time I saw his his rough idea. I was thinking, is that? Yeah, okay. Because he came up with something that I hadn't expected. And that's always a bit challenging because up till that point, the book had only lived in my head. So I didn't think about what it was going to look like. But the more then that we sat with this image and he went through a couple of different variations as to what it could look like, the more it became, and it now is for me, completely enmeshed. This is the book.
Yeah.
It's the cover and it's the contents together. Yeah. And I do agree. I think covers are very important because in my other life, I teach history of art and kind of contemporary culture. So, but you can see now why we actually work very well together, possibly because we're both control freaks. I mean that in the nicest possible way, that we push each other. It's kind of like, yeah, that's good, but we could do a little more. We could make it a little better. And that's something Justin also does with my writing, because there was one particular story in this book that I really struggled with writing. And I think Justin might have seen maybe about 2 or 3 drafts of it. It's The House Under the House, which was a really difficult story to write because it's a very particular mindset. It's a very particular character, and her world is so distinct and so different. And I really, some of these stories slipped out very easily, and then others of them it was very protracted. That was one of them. So yeah, Justin, thank you especially for that one.
Yeah, no,
it's so much better after your edits.
No, that one, I have to admit that I was at the end like, oh, what's happening? So I have to kind of go back, because sometimes I felt like the end wasn't an end that could continue. So I'm looking for the next part again, I'm looking for, come on, Tracy, give me the next part of this. I need to know. But you have to work it out yourself, don't you? And then you get obviously, because it's based on something that another story that you read, if I remember right, but it's...
I've always absolutely loved the Richard Matheson short story, Born of Man and Woman, which is a tiny, tiny story. And it's just so beautiful and surreal because it's written from the point of view of this kind of mutant child who's been penned up in a basement and who knows nothing of the world.
Right.
Whereas my protagonist here wasn't quite in that position, in that she did know something of the world, but again she'd been kept in this kind of stage of suspended animation.
Yeah.
Alicia, I'm just going to have to go and knock off my phone. It's ringing in the background. Apologies.
I'll pause. I'll just pause. Don't worry. I think he's paused. Yes.
Yeah, that's paused.
It's paused. Okay.
Is the sound coming through? Okay.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, no way.
Cool.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Are you comfortable enough with the questions?
Yeah, no, absolutely perfect. I've been editing podcasts that I've been doing over the last few days, so I'm really conscious about, the stuff that you'll need. Like, is the sound okay there? Or, if it's starting to distort, shout, and I can always turn stuff down or up.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I did 7 hours of editing yesterday.
Oh dear.
I'd let them back up, you see, so I hadn't bothered to... I was just recording them, and then I'll do that later. And I thought, no, I need to get these edited. So, it was a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot. I think sometimes people get other people to do this. I mean, normally with my editing is Alistair, but I need to be as well in front of the video to see if actually we're doing the right thing. Yeah. It doesn't chop whatever, So it takes hours. Okay, I think if I resume session, we'll go back. So, yes, we have that. Yes, okay, great. Okay, right. So, yes, that story you were saying, Tracy, is kind of challenging. And when I was reading it, I didn't quite, my imagination always flies. And I was thinking, well, is this child dead? Is it a twin? Is it being kidnapped? Is it buried? And I need to read it again because I'm sure I'll get more information. But it could be sometimes if you don't have the reference of what the writer was had in his or her head when writing this, might be a little bit difficult, or the interpretation might be different from what you were writing and what we read, which is normal, I guess. Every time you read something and then you write something and the readers we like in another cloud, and it's like, oh no, I didn't mean any of that, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Tracy will do with her writing is, and it's always a good skill, is she'll write 2 + 2, but she won't tell you 4. It's up to you as the reader to take the 2, add them together, and that's 4. That's what it is. I think that's one of the things that it kind of that makes it linger in your brain more. Yeah. And it's a nice trick. I mean, I've done it before with a couple of. I never used to do it, and then I read Tracy's stuff and went, right, that's what she's doing. So would start to do some of that stuff. And I have a story which I wrote, which I know that people have taken 2 or 3 different interpretations from. It's a story called The Last Horror Story, and. I know the way that I meant it when I wrote it, and I know some people have understood it that way, but other people have come back with these other interpretations, and I'm like, yeah, fine, you have that interpretation. That's cool. It's not mine anymore. That can be yours. That's
true.
That is a crazy good story. I remember the first time I read it because it was the last story, Alicia, in the Blackroom Manuscripts 4. And actually, there was something else I learned from Justin, how to write a closing story. Because that story it's really mind-bending because the reality keeps shifting within the parameters of the story.
Right.
So, and you love the Gothic, right? This is the ultimate example of the unreliable narrator.
Whoa. I have to say we're reading a few stories, obviously, because I'm one of the Patreons, in the Sinister Horror. So I've been reading all the free gizmos, and I have to say that, your style, Justin, is just like, for me, it's a kind of horror movie that I used to love when I was a child. And I think I know why, because listening to other interviews that you've given to the people, I thought, right, I can see why I like this.
Yeah.
I think because maybe we're all the same age, we're very close, and we have kind of the same references, or even though I'm in Spain and you're in the UK, and when you're in Ireland and you're in the so maybe we all have different inputs, but we all got some similar influences.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of my influences, especially early on, come from old horror movies. And those old horror movies were all the old horror movies that sort of came out from Italy and all that. The Lucio Fulci movies and that kind of sort of thing. Absolutely, my bread and butter, and still go back and love watching those.
Wow, amazing.
Whereas, I think one of the reasons Justin and I work so well together when we're doing kind of a project together is that we have quite different inspirations, because unlike Justin, most of my early inspirations came from books, really, and Misty comics, which are paranormal comics for girls, which I was obsessed with as a kid, and also from local folklore. Because we didn't have TV, so I missed out on a lot of kind of pop culture references in horror. But I'd say just when it comes to recent horror, that we probably would agree on a lot of kind of landmark movies in recent years.
Yeah.
That's right. So what have you found that are the most frustrating moments when you're publishing, and how much of your writing is cathartic and how much of it is for fun? When being in this spotlight, because Tracy writes and that's it, you write and you just worry about your story. But when you're also the editor, the publisher, well, even though Tracy, you've stepped into those areas as well, the pressure of this is what I want to do, I feel fantastic writing this, but maybe it might not sell. What is the curious a bit of what happens, behind the scenes?
Yeah, Tracy, you want to
go? Well, I never worry about what sells, Alicia, which probably is Justin's insides curdling with horror. But I just write what I want to write. Well, I have a really honest reason for doing so, because I believe if I write what I want to write, then I find my true voice, and I can't write on anything that's not my true voice. Sure. So I tend to write very instinctively. I tend to write as well by immersing myself very fully in character, but also I do a lot of nonfiction kind of research as well around a topic. So when I was writing I Spit Myself Out, I was reading medical articles. I'm fascinated by morbid anatomy especially. So I have maybe about 10 books on everything from embalmed bodies to medical curiosities. So I really get into that zone, and it's why my collections are also very thematic as well, because I tend to approach writing in the same way as I do research, and I do find it cathartic. It is very well. I mean, the title of my last book was I Spit Myself Out, and that was because the book itself is a very raw book. It looks at very raw topics. So there was that idea of kind of giving voice, which is really important in the Gothic, particularly because the Gothic is so much to do with kind of people who are voiceless or helpless or marginalized, and it's the idea of kind of releasing all of that. So I mean, I am thinking now a little more pragmatically about writing, about structure in writing, but ultimately it will always come back to just writing my obsessions.
Yeah, it's a good way to go, because then it's the real you, and I think that's what you really want to say. And when we read your stories, it really gets you. If something is really manipulated, manufactured, then it loses this naturality, and then that empathy again gets lost in the marketing, maybe, if you want to call it that way. But I feel that the more natural the story, the more it talks to me as a reader. But also someone who also likes writing like myself, for me, you're a reference. And you've been a reference from the beginning, because I bumped into you on Twitter and I thought, oh, this is what I like to do myself. And look, she's talking to me. And that's how it all started, really, by finding this person I started to admire because of, apart from the fact that she's just very genuine and very approachable, it's just the writers really talk to me. And I thought, yes, that's what I want to be when I become a writer one day. That's it. She's got what I'm looking for. This is so. Some novel writers will probably find that this naturality, some kind of securing and ensuring your own voice as well. You know what I mean? It's just you use these other writers as reference. I mean, we all do that, and you've probably done that too when we go back to your inspirations and all this. So we all have our idols. So nowadays it's fantastic to have access to you guys, and you're not just there on a book, a name on the book, and you use that in a classroom to teach your lesson. It's real. We can talk to you, we can interact, and we become friends. It's fantastic. So yeah, I think we moved away from the publishing moments for Justin. The difficulties, and woohoo, went to a tangent. I tend to do that. Sorry. So yeah, for you, the most frustrating moments of publishing, Justin, what would you say?
Oh, well, I mean, there can be quite a few. I mean, one of the things you always got to make sure, and it goes back to literally just what you're talking about, is the fact that in this day and age, everybody is accessible, right? And because everybody's kind of online, everyone's got a social media presence, and when a publisher releases a book, unless the publisher's got a massive amount of advertising money behind them, a lot of the advertising and a lot of the marketing is going to be done online, and it's going to be done via social media. Now, the easiest way to sell a book is not to go, here's a book, it's amazing, buy it, 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 buy it. People are going to get bored of that, right? One of the things is, oh, that book, that looks interesting, that's okay. Okay, noted, I'll remember that. But then you've got the personality. Well, who's behind the book? Well, let's go find out. It's much easier to sell a person and a brand of that person, and then go on and look in their books, than it is to sell the book directly. So from that sort of point of view, like with Tracy, when a book comes out, she's going around, she's doing these blog tours, she's speaking to people, she's producing content for people, being that kind of approachable, and then people then understand who she is, what she's about. And that's great whilst the book's about to come out. But then whilst it's still out, and once after that, she's still there, she's still online, right? So that whole brand awareness has to continue to come over. So an author has to be able to market themselves, and they have to be willing to be able to put some legwork in and put the effort in to do it. One of the most frustrating things is to have a book, it's great, put it out, no one pays any attention to it, right? So you're like, right, okay, I need to get some attention to it. I'll do what I can. But a publisher can only do so much. The author has to really help on that front, especially from an independent press point of view.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't get those frustrations working with Tracy. And to be honest, most of the authors that I've worked with have been fine, and they've been great. They've understood that. They've gone to conventions, or they've done stuff online. They've helped to market it. And it's about kind of just making sure that they're kind of aware of that and that savviness, and about pushing the brand. Because, hey, yeah, they've got a book out, but remember to push the brand. Because if you push, I've got a book out by this company. So, like, if Tracy says, I got a book out, it's by Sinister Horror Company. That's great. Push the logo as well, because when another book comes out with Sinister Horror Company logo on, you push that. They're inadvertently pushing your book as well, so you're helping each other out. That is the point of a brand, you see. So that's how it kind of works. I mean, if you leave an author to their own devices, a lot of the time they'll think of it like this. I think Tracy is one that, like, her original mindset's kind of, oh, I've got a book, that's great, I'll put it on the shelf. Ooh, can I give the book out to lots of people too? Is that all right? It's like, don't think about actually selling it. It's like, don't worry about that. I just want people to read it, because of course that's what you want to do as an author, right? Yeah. And then it's the publisher's like, yeah, let's try and get you some cash, shall we?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, you need the balance. Is true. It's very frustrating when you created something and then you feel like nobody is looking at it or nobody sees it. And sometimes it's not because it's bad, it's about product. Sometimes that you're not advertising or you're not talking to the right people. I mean, I understand, because I do that myself. I'm trying to create my own brand now, as you might know, and putting videos there on YouTube, and you're thinking every 5 minutes you're checking how many new subscribers I've got. Well, crickets. But then all of a sudden a video goes viral for whatever reason, and boom, off you go, a lot of views. And it is difficult, because you need to know who you're talking to, and you need to tell the world where you are. But you just we feel at the same time you feel embarrassed, don't you, Trace? I think that sometimes I don't really like bragging about myself, but you kind of need to tell the people, here I am, and be a little bit brave. And the same as you send stories to publishers to be known and to get around. So it's the same when you are promoting.
See, I'm absolutely allergic to hard marketing. I couldn't for the life of me, stand on a hill and shout, buy my book. But what I'm very open to is soft marketing. So especially during COVID, it's impossible to do launches, to do kind of physical readings, which would normally be the way that we would kind of always sell a lot of copies of the book initially. So this time I sent out advanced reader copies, kind of consulting with Justin. And then I did about 5 or 6 blogs, each of which were kind of pitched at a slightly different audience, and each of which explored, I guess, a kind of theme or a set of circumstances that underpin the book. So the idea was, in reading it, you get a bit of an insight and a bit of a way in, and hopefully pique your curiosity, and But yeah, I think this time especially, and I'd say Justin would agree with me, it's particularly challenging for kind of small presses trying to get books out without the normal kind of methods of exposure that we're used to, you know, kind of connecting with our enlarged horror family, you know. Yes, so it becomes an attempt to, well, how do we reconstitute those kind of experiences?
Yeah, that's true. Well, you always can count on the little Spanish friend here. I do what I can, I promise.
You're always so good.
We saw a few last year. Yeah, we saw a few Heimlich last year. But yeah, COVID hit me too. And we're like, okay, we're down in numbers, but don't you worry. We'll get you around. So in both cases, when did you realize you wanted to take writing seriously? I think I know a bit about Tracy, but there was like also, was there like a time when someone suggested that you had it in you? Because I had that, and I've not published anything, and I'm a bit of a coward at the moment. But I had a teacher once. She was Scottish. I was studying in the UK. I was living there, and she said to me, and it was horrible. This writing, when I look at it now. It was marked all over the place, and, notes on the sides. And at the end, this quote, and I have it hung on my wall because that's the thing that gives me every day. Yeah, you can do this. And she said, you write like a writer. You just have to watch out with your punctuation. And, English is my second language, my third language. So, and for me, it was a challenge. It was like, okay, I didn't take it seriously. But deep down, it's always been there. I mean, I went for all the jobs that were going to really bring me money. And the writing was like, okay, it's the hobby. But deep down, the writer is there. And one day will come out. And Mary's voice is there. You have it in you. You write like a writer. She gave me the worst bollocks ever in the office because they were like, you can't do this and you can't do that. But this is very good. And I'm like, okay, well, why are you shouting at me? And then to say you don't have time, that doesn't exist. You have time. You make the time. And that was the first time that someone was aggressive but kind at the same time. And so have you got a moment like this in both cases where you thought, yeah, I like writing, but someone also has said to me, you've got it in you, and when do you decide that's it?
Tracy, you want to go?
My very first job, apart from building a stone wall around the graveyard, was writing stories.
Just casually thrown out there, apart from that.
You really told us.
Gothic in the blood.
Well, my father actually, and Justin's father were formerly builders, so so yeah, I was the eldest. I was his apprentice. But anyway, from I was about 13 to I was 16, I used to write short stories for radio.
Oh.
None of which survived, thankfully, because they were absolutely terrible, and they were based on kind of very, very much cribbed from Misty stories, like heavy dose of the paranormal and disasters. But I was so nonchalant about it. Like, I would come home from school on Friday, I would have my dinner, I'd sit down, write a short story, read it out on Saturday morning, So, but yeah, I didn't really take it seriously. It was something I liked to do. It was like drawing or painting or reading or listening to music, and I just, but it's weird. I guess in my head, I always kind of thought I was going to be a writer, but I wasn't really bothering to write. But then, and I know we've discussed this before, Alicia, when I was sick, I just realized, oh my goodness, this could have been it. I might never have written. And that was a real accelerant to start writing, apart from having to kind of convalesce at home. So I think a lot of the ideas for the Unheimlich maneuver came out of that experience, being confined to home, and seeing home as not necessarily a very reassuring space because of it. But I guess I really have a lot of early editors to thank, because the first story that I sent anywhere was looking for Wild Goose Lodge, and I wrote it actually as part of research I was doing at the time. So it was kind of a standalone artifact. I sent it to a publisher, Hic Dragones, based in Manchester, and they took it up for an anthology, and it was the last story in the anthology. And then I was invited over to Manchester, and Ramsey Campbell was in the same anthology. And he was somebody that I'd read, you know, when I was a teenager.
Wow.
And so that was like super, super exciting. So I suppose I had a really quick start, kind of, because from then on, it was like, oh my God, like, it seems I can write stuff. And now I'm in, you know, anthologies with people that I've, you know, read, whose books are on my bookshelves. So I guess that just gives me a huge amount of confidence.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great. I didn't know that part. Yeah, it was brilliant. What about Justin?
So, I mean, ever since I was a kid and at school, I used to write stories. My first ever story was a horror story, actually. It was basically a retelling of Michael Jackson's Thriller, the music video. Because we used to watch weird stuff when we were kids. Like, this is 6 years old as well, you know? And that's pretty horrific stuff to be watching, but that was the time, right?
That's cool.
So I always used to write... Sorry.
I'm just remembering Justin showed me his creative writing copy from school. It was a towering work of staggering genius, and it features, is it a ghost ninja snow leopard?
Poltergeist ninja snow leopard. Yeah. So this is the level of stories I write, but I would write them, and they get longer and longer, and like they'd fill up an exercise book and all that. So I did that at school, and I really enjoyed it, and would always do it. And then I did English at university, creative studies actually. Well, English and creative studies, so reading books and writing them basically. But then when university kind of ended, I got completely put off by it. So I'd always thought I wanted to do it and enjoyed it, but I was put off because I met so many people that said, I'm going to be a writer. And I'd look at them and they hadn't written anything. They just do nothing all day.
Yeah.
Smoke weed, drink booze, go out, watch telly, just doing nothing. But they think they were this kind of genius. And so in my brain, I thought being a writer equals just dossing around, you know, doing absolutely nothing. So I was embarrassed to say that's what I wanted to do. Oh. And because I was embarrassed to say I wanted to do that, then my brain said, well, you don't want to do that. So I just kind of put it aside for the best part of about 10 years.
Wow.
And then I got into this zone where I was watching all of I was collecting all the video nasties, so all the horror films that were banned in the UK in the early 80s, because, you know, they were being released uncut on video and they shouldn't be. But, you know, it becomes a thing where I want to watch all these, so I did, and I got really interested in horror movies again. And it was because of that I kind of thought to myself, wouldn't it be fun to write a horror movie? So I wrote a script,
wow.
right, which was which later became my book Punch. But I wrote this script. It took me like, you know, a good couple of weeks, perhaps a month, all in all. Wrote it, loved it, brilliant. Then realised no one was going to read it, and it was never going to get made into a movie. And then I put it away again. And it was only when my brother showed me this photography book that he'd made through print-on-demand services that I realised that if I put the effort into making a book, even if I didn't get it out through anybody, I could make it myself and I could put it on my shelf. And all I wanted was a book, say I've written it, put it on my shelf and job done.
Right.
So that's what I did. But then when I did that, I met somebody else that was doing it. And we decided that we realised if we formed together and made a publishing house,
right.
therefore we could brand them together, and then I just didn't stop. I kind of had these ideas that have been floating around in my head for donkey's years.
Yeah.
And you know, like an idea becomes like a ghost in your mind, doesn't it? Right? It won't leave you alone. You've got to write it out. I mean, that's sort of, you know, writer writes it out and then it leaves you alone. So when I wrote the first book, I wrote 4 books in the space of about a year.
Wow.
Before I'd even had the first one out. So I had one out, one was being edited, I wrote another one, then that was being edited, I wrote another one, and then the cover of the first one was being done when I was writing the 4th. Because it was just bang, 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 I want to get these stories out of my head.
Wow. Amazing. It's amazing. So yeah, you sometimes think, like you said, the from early childhood, you think, well, writers, how do you become a writer? We'll get to that as well. But it's true, all the frustrations and all the kind of baggage that comes around it. When I started on Twitter not long ago as well, and I was like really excited about being around writers and writing my own stories and seeing people's reactions on my blog, and that was great. And then you always come across someone who says, whoa, it's not worth it. You're going to do nothing with that. And you're thinking, well, why are you doing that to me? I'm quite happy. It took me years to make it. Don't put me off it. You're not going to survive. It's like, well, don't do that. There's so many elements throughout the life of a writer, even when you've not published. You feel like you are a writer. I feel I'm a writer. Tracy knows I've been going around in circles like a donkey. But you feel it, and you are, and one day you'll be what you want to be. But there are so many impediments, from people's messages to maybe not enough information in the schools, which we get to that as well. And
yeah.
It's wow, and maybe we need to think also of the people that come now, the youngsters that would like to become a writer as well as a YouTuber, like my little one, that he wants to be a YouTuber, but he also has a story, so we'll see. So what stories would you say have influenced you from other writers? I mean, you've been mentioning some people and some influences, but have you got someone that you would say, yes, definitely these or definitely that? Film even, it doesn't necessarily have to be authors.
I think for me, my earliest influences in my kind of Bronte style upbringing were, unsurprisingly, the Brontes. My paternal grandmother had kind of moved into a granny flat, and she had tons of books. So she gave them to us. And my parents just let me read kind of omnivorously. So I read a huge amount of the classics then, a lot of Georgette Eyre, a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, a lot of kind of more harrowing stuff like Richard Adams kind of books, not just Watership Down, but Plague Dogs and others. So also I managed to kind of somehow wangle a ticket to the adult library. So I was reading maybe about 6 to 8 books a week.
Wow.
At that point. So, but the ones that I was really responding to were Bronte's, Jane Austen, Edgar Allan Poe, Roald Dahl's grown-up stories. When I discovered those, my God, they were a revelation. Ray Bradbury, I was really passionate about as well. And then I love Ian Banks. I love Douglas Copeland, Angela Carter, Donna Tartt, and they are quite various writers, and very few of them are regarded as horror, because I think that sometimes if you write horror but you only read horror, it becomes almost like an echo chamber. And I find that the wider I read, kind of, and the more open to influence I am, the richer my interior world becomes. So it just adds kind of breadth to my vision, as well as what I can output. And then there are some contemporary writers that I just love to. Priya Sharma never writes the wrong word. Georgina Bruce is a marvelous writer too. Carmen Maria Machado, Nadia Bulkin, Marina Enriquez. There's a ton of fantastic writers out there. So, but I like to think that I'm reading kind of writers who are new to me all the time.
Right. So you cannot really pick one and say, because it's like an evolution for you as well. You're constantly influenced by writers. So you cannot really say, well, that, is kind of, because
although I have to say, I think what stopped me writing a novel to date has been Shirley Jackson, because God damn her, she wrote 2 perfect novels, and it's really, really hard to see how to write a novel that could be as perfect as anything she wrote. So the Haunting of Hill House and We've Always Lived in the Castle are just peerless.
Right. And what about Justin?
Yeah, I mean, Tracy comes onto a really good point here, and it's something I think about a lot when it talks about what influences you, and if you're only influenced by horror. I mean, if anybody writing horror is only influenced by Stephen King, you are only going to get Stephen King copies, right? So it's great when people are reading more and reading that. I mean, personally, myself, before I got into writing horror, I probably only read about 10 horror books in my life. I read a lot of books. Mm-hmm. You know, I studied English at GCSE, at A level at university, so I read a lot of different stuff. You know, from classics to modern contemporary, but it wasn't loads of horror there. But when I started writing my horror stuff, the two that I went back on to remember to think about was that I'd read Cabal and Weave World by Clive Barker, and I'd read Renegades by Sean Hudson, and that was very much the two kind of horror. And I didn't even go back and reread them. I mean, the two Clive Barker books are in some of my favourite books I ever read, and actually, I'll tell you about that a bit later on. Actually, I'll come back to that. But yeah, so and I love those. The Sean Hudson book, I read once, but it kind of stuck with me because it was so violent. It was those kind of like the heads being exploding and being described in minute detail. I always remember that, and that's what I drew on. I mean, as I go through now, there is evolution on stuff that I'm very much influenced by. Like, I've read a lot of Chuck Palahniuk, the guy who did Fight Club. So I love his work, and one of my books I read his book Rant, and I went, that's a really good narrative style. I wonder if I can do that. Mm-hmm. With regards to influences within modern writers, I mean, is the new horror scene which is going on at the minute, is it any good? Well, if it's any good because if it's influencing other people's work. If it's not, then all we're doing is looking back and we're just trying to replicate. If there's new stuff that is influencing stuff now, we know that it's actually good. And I can see that happening. I mean, from my point of view, people I've been influenced with, well, Tracy here has been one. There's a very direct influence on some of my stories that have got a little bit more subtle in the way that I'm telling stuff and trying to make that linger, which has been good. Kit Power is another one. The way he uses voice very much has influenced my style as well. That's just two that I can pick up off the top of my head. But if I cycle through, I bet I can find some others as well.
Yeah, no, it's great because you're not just influenced by the typical, you were saying, the classics or the things that we have to read at university. It's modern people, living authors, people that are around us. Why do we have to wait for them to die? Just do something about it now.
And also there's sometimes a bit of snobbery about writing. It's like there are a list of approved books that you should read. And there are some books on those canonical lists that I've either tried to read and given up, or I have no interest in reading.
Yeah.
But I will very happily read 1970s Gothic romances. Yeah. I thoroughly enjoy them. I love that genre. I love the way that they riff on early Gothic novels, but they're almost universally derided as a form. But I honestly believe that there are no guilty pleasures. I read what I read. I like what I read. I like what I watch, and make no apologies for it.
No, that's right. And it's all, at the end of the day, is what influences your writing later. So everything is very welcome indeed.
Well, I remember having this discussion at university at a tutorial, and we're having a discussion. I can't even remember, some text or other. And people were, kind of giving these opinions. We're like, well, if we look at this through the kind of lens of Reichian analysis, we discover some very interesting things. And the tutor just said to me, what did you think? And I was like, yeah, I really liked it. And then he was kind of looking at me, and I said nothing else. And I said, well, and then finally I kind of went, well, sometimes you just respond to it. You think this is very beautiful. This is very true. This has given me an insight.
That's right.
And he just kind of looked at me and he said, "You're a bit of a noble savage, aren't you, when it comes to reading?" Like, totally, yeah.
And on the flip side, it's okay not to like stuff as well, just because it's universally. I read M.R. James recently. There was one story in there I really liked, and the rest I didn't.
Lost Hearts?
No, not that one. It's something to do with it's in a maze. There's they find this maze in I forget what it's called, but it was really green, and I just remember being captivated by that one. But I struggled with M.R. James. And I struggle with, I tried reading Lovecraft as well. And again, struggled with that prose.
I am actually struggling with that. I've been so guilty with Lovecraft because everybody's like, yeah, Lovecraft. And I'm reading, I'm going, oh my God, what was this?
No, I find Lovecraft just really uninteresting.
I feel really like I belong to the group now.
Please take your sinister crown now.
I mean, the ideas that he does, is interesting. The whole cosmic horror thing is good, and it was, as far as I'm aware, very original back then. But as a writer, even back then, it's not like, oh, it's old prose. You just need to get used to it. No, I've read stuff from that time and before, and it's been much more dynamic and interesting.
Yeah, what you like as well. Yeah, so it's
I thought Moby Dick was one of the most boring books that I ever read. Finnegan Blake is frankly a load of shite. There's an awful lot of books that have reached. Oh, sorry, you can cut that.
No, it's all right. It's great. It's naturality.
There are a lot of books that really are written either, for a very specific audience, or they're written almost self-consciously. They're written to be works of high literature. And, sometimes in the process of doing so, I believe that the heart kind of goes out of those, and there's just so much less to respond to. I mean, you can read something and admire the form, but you're unlikely to want to reread it. The story's unlikely to stay with you,
Yeah. But there are some which have high, that is kind of like high literature. I mean, or try and do something a bit interesting and weird like that. I mean, House of Leaves, that was something that was trying a very different kind of form with it, but it's a wonderful book.
Yeah.
Good, because they give you that copy of it.
Thanks, Tracy.
I think that now that we are all laughing and we're getting a good dynamics now and we're more relaxed, let's do a little quiz. It's a bit of a silly quiz because you're going to recognize these. I've chosen these images because they had an impact in me. And I want to see how much of an impact all these images have had on you and how much do you recognize. So let's see.
I'll tell you what, the middle top, that gave me nightmares for absolute years. And in my story, Mad Dog, the opening prologue, it's a werewolf book, right? The opening prologue to it, there's a girl, she's been savaged by this werewolf. She's crawling down the alleyway and she turns around like that to look at our hero in that prologue. And she turns and she just whispers, "Go away." And she does that as a nod to that scene, to that freaking scene.
It is. This is exactly what I heard you. I mean, I've cheated because I heard you talking about this in another program, in a podcast that Tracy sent me the other day. But I thought, great, I felt the same. Even to this day, I remember the moment of watching this video for the first time, and I must have been 8. And, everything gets later in Spain. And I remember hiding behind my dad in the sofa because it was like New Year's Eve. They played this for the first time, like a new thing. Yeah. And I hid behind my dad. And up to this day, I cannot watch this scene. When it turns into a werewolf, sorry, I can't. I can watch the zombie dance. I can do it. I can play it many times. The song, I had the LP. I just can't do with this. Exactly the transformation. It was so great. It's so scary.
Yeah, that was the video. That was the moment that turned me into a horror fan. Really, I kind of like monsters and dinosaurs, and then that was the moment.
Yeah, I guess it might actually be for many people. What about the rest, Tracy? I know I put some silly stuff, but this is what has influenced. But Tracy's is getting a goal.
I have to, because the images are a bit small on my screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, for me, it has to be Robert Smith.
yes, that definitely.
Yeah.
For you,
yeah, I mean, I was a fanatic Cure fan from the age of, I think it was 14 that I first started listening to him. And the first album I listened to was the Head in the Door, and it just blew me away. I never knew music could sound like that, up to that point. Music was something on the radio. It was kind of, I could take it or leave it. But this was just something else. And I've been a fan since then. I think that their album Disintegration is one of the most wonderful and perfect albums ever made. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the video for Lullaby, or for Lullaby from Disintegration.
It's the Spider-Man, the song of the Spider-Man, yes.
Yeah. Spider-Man is having you for dinner tonight.
I remember these videos when I was maybe about 10, 11 at the time, and I thought, that's so gross. And I couldn't keep my eyes off this. I loved it. I found it repulsive, but I couldn't get my eyes off it. I was like, I want more of these.
Well, actually, the first time I ever saw The Cure live was on their Disintegration tour. So, yeah, hearing perform that on stage was pretty amazing. Which I guess makes me the senior person here.
We all see you.
Yeah, you were all kids then. But yeah, I think that Robert Smith is just amazing. I mean, he writes so beautifully, so plaintively. He really inhabits every character that he projects kind of in his songs. I love the lyrics, I love the sound. I love that kind of melancholy and yet the playfulness as well. There's like this beautiful kind of all-round vision that has just enchanted me. And just to look and plugging the book again. And then
good work.
I actually got to work with Lol Tolhurst back in 2017 when he was doing his own book tour for Cured, which is a phenomenal read. It's a great autobiography. And we ended up reading each other's books.
Great.
And it was a real fangirl moment.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure that feeling must have been amazing to be able to be there. And what we said before about having idols and manage to meet them, and it's fantastic. Yeah. What about the other pictures? Do you recognize them? I know they're a bit tiny for you, Tracy, maybe.
Well, I can see Dracula, Bram Stoker on the left. And I adore that book. I mean, Dracula and Carmilla are two, absolutely kind of central vampire narratives. They've made it really hard to write a vampire story, to be honest, because, it is quite difficult to think, how to reinvent this story. And I'm always very interested when writers like Poppy Z. Bright or kind of others try and do kind of a take on the vampire story, because when it's done kind of properly, it can be very refreshing and very unexpected. But I guess the vampire is such a massive kind of central Gothic and horror myth. It can be quite difficult to do.
Yeah, this one, I think this film, when I went to watch in the cinema, for me, that was a revelation, really, because, I was used to the typical Nosferatu, everything that came before it, and I was a fan of vampires. And I remember I went with a friend to watch this in original version. At the time, I must have been a B1 English level, so my English wasn't what you can hear now. It was very, very premature, very raw. But we went and we said, no, let's watch it, because I was encouraging my friend. I was teaching English to my friend. I was helping her with the grammar. I said, let's watch this in English. We need to do this in English. We can't just get the dubbing. So we did that, and we stayed for the 2 sessions. So we watched one, and then we stayed again, and we could do that. Back in the time, we could do that. So we watched it twice, and we had to come home because it was late. We were only teens. But I loved it. I thought that was so refreshing, the way that Coppola had redone the story and taken some of the elements. Obviously the romance is there, that in the original book is not so romantic, this character. But I loved it. Now when I watch it now, maybe I think a bit different. I think, oof, a little bit of sexism there, and maybe some messages that now we would not accept so much. But back then it was great. It was great. What about the others?
That's Scooby-Doo up top, but I can't really comment on it because Scooby-Doo wasn't part of my childhood. Over to you.
Oh, that's a shame. That's because Tracy didn't have a TV, did you?
Nope.
But for me, very much. Yeah, absolutely. Scooby-Doo. In fact, I remember when we first used to watch Scooby-Doo, kind of used to scare me when I was a proper little kid. But yeah, no, grew up on Scooby-Doo. Absolutely love it.
Yeah, good memories from them. And they've been reused. I don't know if any of you are Supernatural fans.
No, but I have heard about it. They did a Scooby-Doo episode, didn't they?
It was great. I am a super fan of Supernatural. I mean, I'm obsessed to the point of rewatching this many times. And my youngest son is called after one of the characters. I just love it. Yes, and yes, I just can't get enough. So much that goes into it. A lot of folklore. They use a lot of folklore, and they use a lot of figures, a lot of themes, and it's fantastic. It's fantastic. Well, personal taste. But yeah, they did one episode with the characters being in the Scooby-Doo, and it was pretty amazing. It was quite, I don't know, a wink to the audience. And we've got some more that you haven't mentioned yet. I don't know. There's one that is very tiny that you might not be able to see.
Salem's Lot.
That's right.
Yeah, so Salem's Lot's a film I only watched probably about 3 years ago.
Really?
I'd never seen it before. I'd heard the name. Obviously, it was, it's a very famous book and a very famous film. And it was, I'd heard it a lot and mentioned in things like Scream Comic when I was a kid, but I'd never actually watched it until a couple of years back.
Right.
So I don't have that kind of, a lot of people, that moment there particularly is quite iconic, isn't it?
Yeah. You watch it.
I've actually never seen it. I mean, I read the book as a teenager, but I lived quite away from our local cinema, so I only really saw movies really intermittently and no TV at all. So again, it's just one of the slice that's kind of missing.
Right.
But I did really enjoy the book, if that's any help.
No, that's good. It's just to see how much of my influences are your influences. It's not right or wrong, It's a bit of a game. And no, just to get to know you better in a different way, not just asking questions. But
I'm going to say I don't recognize the last picture at all.
So that's the Crypt Keeper from the Tales of the Crypt.
Yes.
Now, it's kind of a weird one, this, because I don't know if Tales of the Crypt if it was shown when I was a kid on UK TV or not, because I certainly don't. I know it much more as kind of like an American thing, and I think I remember like videos of it being on the shelf. So I would kind of like see these videos and see this image and then pick it up when I was a kid and look at the back and read what the stories were. And that's how I probably kind of consumed a lot of horror, because, we couldn't watch it, but we could go into the video rental shops and or into the places where you buy them. And you see the covers, and the covers would tell you a story straight away, and then you pick up and read the back of this lurid delight, and then kind of put it back. And the story in your brain is probably always way better than the story that you actually see,
No, yeah, it's well, no, it's interesting to see because as I was saying before, where we get in Spain or we got in Spain, we get a mixture of English production and American production. And obviously that's different for you. Tracy was telling me about some zombie programs that you got in the UK that I can't get here. I can't remember the name. You told me the name about it.
That was the TV program In the Flesh.
That's right. Yes, it's something that got on Netflix in Spain, and I'm like, because she's recommended that to me, and we were talking about zombies, and they're probably the least likable monster for us. But nowadays, the redoings of them is quite interesting because they have this medical background and explanation.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Yeah. I would say keep looking for it.
I will do. Let's see.
Yeah. I think it was shown originally on BBC. If that's any help.
Okay, love to.
Yeah, I don't know it, but me and TV series, I'm terrible. It takes up too much of my time. I can watch a film, hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, yeah, maybe. But a TV series is it's a lot of commitment. I have a tendency to trail off before the end of it.
I'm the complete opposite. I find films are great, but I kind of hanker for the additional detail. So for me, a really good series. I'm watching season 3 at the moment of The Handmaid's Tale of Watch series 1 and 2, and there's just such a, I don't know. I think that they're ideal for the completist, for the person who likes enormously long novels, which I also do.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It depends on people say, like you said, Justin, that it takes a lot of time. I really like TV, and probably I'm trying to balance more my book reading, because I watch too much TV. But I only watch TV at night. It's not like when I was a kid. Yeah, I was in front of the TV quite frequently during the weekend, not during the week, because TV there weren't so many things as they are now. You have thousands of channels. Before it was just 3 channels and specific programs at specific times. But I do remember sitting with my mom and my dad and watching this. Well, my dad would fall asleep and me and my mom would be watching these things. And then she wonders now, how the hell do I like all the Gothic and all this horror when she started it off, So she was the one to blame. So, right. So moving away from this now. So in one of the other interviews, Tracy, you were talking about the impact of writing in other countries. I'm very interested to see how the place, the location, the time of the day influences you when you write, both for you or for Justin. It's just for both of you. They moving away and saying, I'm going to take a weekend. Whatever, just to get inspired or to see if I write something different. How does that work for you? And I'll change the screen.
Go on then, Tracy.
I love traveling, and I keep a locations notebook with me when I travel, because I'm fascinated by the tiny differences, and I always have been since I was kind of lucky enough to start going to other countries. And it's been the thing I've missed quite a lot kind of during last year, is just that inability to have that refreshing, because I obviously cannibalize my own notes all the time in terms of setting. But it's also made me realize that I'm a very interior writer. I write a lot about, Irishness, folklore, bodies, homes, they're all still really readily accessible. But I do miss I miss being somewhere else and writing, because I'm fascinated by identity, and the way your own identity becomes untethered, the way your very self becomes a little less defined, the further away you move from the things that define you: family, culture, heritage, home. So Ireland only opened up for a month, by the way, in the last year, where you could kind of really travel around outside the parameters of your own county. We've been locked down, 11 out of 12 months, pretty much. So in that, in that month, I would just get in the car and just drive for hours and right by the seaside. And, I'd drive 3 hours to look at a dolmen. I was just so hungry for sensation and experience and connecting, because, there's only so many times you can map a 2-kilometer radius or a 5-kilometer radius. And I'm lucky enough to live in a very pretty village. So, having had one vaccination, I'm now starting to think, oh my God, the rest of the world may be no longer theoretical, And I'm reading Atlas Obscura at the moment, which is a wonderful big weighty book, which is full of really odd and bizarre places around the world. And I'm just making lists at the moment of museums of oddities. I'm particularly drawn to preserved saints' bodies, catacombs, So I'm literally making lists of like bizarre caves and strange islands. Yeah.
I'll have to give you some places to come and visit in Spain. We have a few of those.
Yes, so, please.
Yes, I will do.
Any kind of ruins, kind of folkloric oddities. And I just find that kind of thing really fills the well. And I think after a year of kind of inward looking, and I spit myself out, it was a very introspective experience. I'm really starting to feel that need to go outward again and to just fill the senses, fill the experience, fill the memory again, just to recharge.
Yeah. You'll have to do talks online for now. I think that's the only thing we can do. But it's not the same, but we can have a little bit of a taste. What about Justin? Did you actually go out and do you get inspired by a specific moment of the day, even if you don't,
Yeah, I mean, I always find, I write when I can, is really the truthful answer. If I have a choice, the morning is the best. I'm just completely uncluttered. I come up with my best stuff at that point because my brain is active and it's fresh and I'm excited. I want to get on with this. And it's much easier for me to focus and concentrate. Then as it sort of goes on throughout the day, I can get a bit kind of weary. Or if I'm trying to do it at night, I've got all the stuff that's happened during that day still in my head. So it does make it a bit harder. But I can, when I get into the zone, I can get into the zone. But yeah. I always think my best work is probably done in the mornings. But also, traveling wise, actually, I kind of like to write when I am traveling, if that makes sense. So one of my favorite times, and I don't do it very often, but it's a nice place. And I think I actually know Tracy does this herself, is writing in airports. Because in an airport or on a train or on a plane or on a coach or whatever, you aren't really in a space. You've completely dedicated this time to being here. So you are doing what you're doing just by sitting down. That's it. So you've got nothing better to do than write. And it's completely, there's nothing distracting you. In fact, actually, the things around you can become quite amusing. What a wonderful place to sit there and people watch. That's true. And you've got this random input of like all these different people collecting up on things going by the window, which just can kind of really help to spark stuff off. So it doesn't happen very often, but if I am traveling somewhere, always take a pen and pad with me so I can write stuff down.
That's brilliant. Yes. Right.
I totally agree. I think being on a plane especially is one of the few times when our phones don't work.
True.
Even if they are.
You don't get the distraction.
They still won't work. So, and I kind of love and hate my smartphone. I really resent the amount of time I spend on it. So on a plane, it's just saying there, I'm in the moment. There's literally nothing else going on. And I've written quite a bit on planes, and I actually wrote most of a story about being on a plane in 2 different airports. I think it's a story called Your Flight Time Has Been Changed. And it appeared appeared in an American anthology. His title escapes me at the moment, but it was literally all about that. It was just this really weird moment of being on a plane where anything can happen, because you don't know where you are, you don't know when you are. It's a really discombobulating feeling.
Yeah, so these moments. I'm gonna send you now to some of your quotes. I mean, this has been a bit of a nightmare. It's taking me longer to find quotes than to put all these interviews together, because I didn't know what to choose. There were so many things to choose from. That's why it was difficult. But I want to change now the screen again, and let's get this quiz out of the way, because I would like you to read me these quotes. If you can see them, I would love to hear you read them, your own quotes. I mean, I've chosen these. These are from two of your stories, so 2 stories each. I mean, I could have gone here forever picking quotes that I like, but I've chosen these particular ones because they talk to me. So as a reader, this is my input to you. If it's any use, they talk to me. So, and I'll tell you why later if you want. So maybe, is it okay for you to read this, Tracy? Because it might be a bit small, yeah? So maybe we could do one each. We could do Tracy and then Justin and Tracy Justin again, because we have 2 and 2.
Yep. So the first one is from the end story of I Spit Myself Out. The pulsing best of me was wrenched out. I am a clock run down, an abandoned nest. The most awful thing of all, I still live.
Okay, that's beautiful. That actually got me very much because, as I said to you before, I miscarried twice. So that is, it's just like that. You are an abandoned nest and you are still alive. And why? You ask yourself why. So that was very powerful, that fragment. I mean, there are others in the same story that they got me with the thing there. But yes, definitely that talked to me because of my personal experience. So yeah. Okay, so Justin, let's read yours.
Okay. Right. Okay. So this one is from Dear Constance. Repeated in the Corpse Flower Sampler, originally published in My Death Dreams at Christmas, which is my short story collection all about Christmas, because I love Christmas and I love horror, so I couldn't resist to do this.
It's great.
Yeah. So it's okay. Yeah. Christmas is the darkest time of year, a time of pagan magic and ritual. This is not a time for God. This is a time for Pan, or the devil, whatever you wish to call him.
Yeah, this is so creepy, this story. I loved it. It's got the blood. It's got the blood, and it's fantastic how you make this link. I mean, you can more or less guess what's going to happen or not. And then you doubt, you make the reader doubt. Is it what I'm thinking is? Is it going to be? Yeah, it's great. It's great. And I have that affinity as well with Christmas time. We make it all religious, but really there's a lot of pagan about it.
Oh, very much so, yeah.
And when we talk about folklore with Tracy, I really like the seasons now that we Easter time now. For me, the Easter bunny is an evil thing. So I love the fluffy pictures and colors, but really, I have a little story that I wrote, and it's evil. A giant egg in the garden. So I might send you that if you want to read it.
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, I'm back to reading soon. My headaches, pains have gone, so I can read again. So yeah, send him over, please.
I will do. Okay, right, Tracy. The next one.
The next one's from The Woman Next Door. I'm a corpulent mummy monster performing endless placatory rituals to assuage a screaming, sulking god.
Yeah, and that's exactly how one of the side effects of being a mom, just having had a baby, that your body's not your body, you is monstrous, but at the same time is homey, and yeah, this child is a bundle of joy, they say, but sometimes it kind of neutralizes your brain and it soaks you and it absorbs your energy. So yes, it's soaking God. Yeah, it's great.
And it's a nice flow that quote, isn't it? Just the way that the passage kind of runs as you read it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole story is, I think I chose this. I keep talking about this one because it's the one that really has stayed. I mean, I like the others as well, but this one keeps coming back. I thought I need to get a quote from this story, because yes, I'm a mom, so I engage with this story. Okay.
And I am not, but I am really, really fascinated by pregnancy and motherhood.
The day you want, I'll tell you all about it if you want to use it for personal stuff.
No, I'm quite okay just to explore the fiction.
It's got its moments. And when it doesn't go well, it definitely is horrific. Yeah, it's horrific. But I think you put, you get this, you get it. So it's, at the end of the day, is what happens to the female body. So you can imagine you're female, so and maybe that female, maybe a male writer with high empathy levels and someone who's observant can get to writing something like this. I don't know. I haven't read anything yet, so we'll see. Okay, so Justin, the last one.
Yeah, so this is from the story I Love You, in the Death Cap sampler, and originally featured in my short story collection, wonderfully titled Death Dreams in a Whorehouse. Which I love as a title. So it goes, it's rather savoury, isn't it? So it goes, I had pushed outside of my world and felt an angel, but my success only heightened my desires. I needed more.
Creepy. I mean, mirrors, pictures, things that come through portals. For me, it's like, yes. And then we have this vampire thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that story was fun because it was like the idea was that it was, so it took like a kind of a fairy tale setting and just kind of like pulled that out, kind of a what if. And the original construct of it is that the fact that the actual story itself is just 3 words, I love you. But then each word has got like a little number next to it and then a footnote. So then it explains I. Well, what does I mean? So you get the background of what I is. And then love. What is it saying by love? What is this desire? And then you, who is you? And then once you've read all that, you've got this story. And if you go back and reread I Love You, it now means something a bit different than maybe what you first meant. Hopefully something a bit more chilling.
Yeah, and actually I was reading it and I thought, it's great. It's got fairy tale thing. Not bad for a man. That was my thinking.
Love it. Not bad for a man.
Not for a man. Yeah. I was thinking, it's because it's like, well, men don't talk about ideal women and okay, there's fairy tale thing. But then I was reading it and I'm going, what are you doing here? Oh, that's gross. But again, I couldn't put it down because it took me back to things I read when I was younger. And yeah, great. I love that. Deconstructing fairy tales, of course. We need to do that. So it's awesome. So thinking about the future of horror and new writers, going back to what we were saying at the start, I find that personally, the writing business or the writing job doesn't get promoted the way it should, and definitely not in horror. And then you get kids, my 10-year-old, for example, he didn't want to read a thing, and we were like pushing him, and there were tears all over the place, and I don't want to read, and I felt guilty because he got books from grandma and nana and grandpa, and he didn't want to read those. I felt like, oh my God. And one day, he's more of a gamer. Kids nowadays, it's just on machines.
Yeah.
And one day he said, I'm watching these videos about this guy, but the stories are creepy and they scare me. And I introduced him to these stories by mistake in one summer camp that we did here with some kids. And we were talking about circus, and these videos came up because it was like horrific monsters and toys that move with creepy faces. And it got in his head. He stayed there for a while, and then he came across these videos. And then one day he said, Mom, I want to read these books. What books? Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't know if you know the author is called
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, well, this is horror. You're a scaredy pants. You look under your bed every night. I'm staying with you every night because you can't sleep. I want to read those. He hasn't stopped. And he was even thinking of creating his own stories. Oh, it broke my heart, It's like, yeah, it really got me, I couldn't, no, yeah. So, and then he's got a colleague in class that she reads. I mean, he's 10. I have to say, yes, he's 10, and he's reading the stuff that is for all the kids. But hey, I've read the first book, and I thought, right, we have the first book there are mentions to other Gothic writers and horror writers. I thought, this is culture as well. It's not just horror like people think that horror, bad quality writing. No, or reading is good. There are references here. And he's got a colleague in the classroom that she reads Stephen King, and she's 10. I mean, Stephen King swears, and she's reading this stuff. So, okay, what do we do with these kids? What is your recommendation? What would be your approach? If you could do something, you could have an input and an influence, what would you do in both cases? Let's start with Justin this time.
For those sort of things, I say fine, let them read them. I mean, so if they're swearing, fine, let them read the swearing. It's okay for kids to read swearing, to see swearing on TV, providing they are aware and they are told, yeah, you can see it, but you don't repeat it. Okay? And, kids are kids. When they're together, they probably will repeat it, right? But as long as they don't do it respectfully in front of adults and in bad places, fine, I mean, I was reading... When I first started reading and then started reading more adult books very early on, I'd be in... When I picked up Clive Barker's Cabal, I can't remember how old I was, but I was only just in double digits, I think, at the time. But the allure that came from my point of view of wanting to read stuff was because I can't watch that film, but I can go and buy that book. So I could get the dark and the nasty and I could buy it and nobody could stop me. So that's why I did it. I read The Exorcist at a very young age because before the film was banned in the UK, you couldn't see it even if you were the right age.
Wow.
So, picking the book up, I was able to understand what the story was. And so that darkness and that allure is a good way of enticing the younger generation to start reading stuff like that, and they start reading in general. They pick up because it's unrated. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think providing... it's good that a parent can be aware of what they're reading or slightly, that's fine. But it's about that parenting of just being able to understand this is what's in that world there, and that's fantasy make-believe world, but you don't repeat it over here in this social situation in this real world. Mm. And people need to, as a kid, you need to understand that, whether or not you're reading it or you just see it on TV or whatever, but you need to know there's a difference between the two.
Yeah.
So that's my input. Other than that, I just say, yeah, great, go for it.
Yeah. And about getting it to more into academic terms, maybe Tracy, that you are in the academia, you're a teacher yourself as well, and how would you actually promote the writing job and among maybe your students? And do you see that there is like a gap for encouraging people to write horror and to write Gothic?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, like when I teach seminars in the Gothic and folk horror, but I'm very aware that I'm teaching creative peers because my students are, they're emerging artists or kind of emerging designers. So I just talk to them about writing being a creative practice exactly like theirs, that we're struggling to work with themes and articulate how we feel about them and open them up kind of for others to actually consume and take their own meaning out of, because you can universalize, I guess, a lot of the creative process across all the different media. But I mean, it is a secret desire of mine to at some stage run a creative writing program. I really feel that there's a lot of encouragement, but also feedback that young writers need. But I just see how keen people are to tell stories. I mean, I did it all the time as a kid. I was writing poetry short stories, novels, plays, you know, before I hit my late teens. I'd no fear. And like I see it with my little 6-year-old neighbor Jake, who when I spit myself out, came out, and his mom was really excited because she's in the and but straight away his reaction was really interesting. It was like, "Can I do it?" And then the next week he'd started a book, and then he insisted I photograph it and send it to Justin on WhatsApp, just for a professional opinion.
Cool.
And it was actually a really sweet moment because I was looking at my phone and he was like, "Wow, what does he say? What does he say?" And he said, "Oh, he says brilliant." And he was like, "Great."
Oh, that's so cool.
But he really wasn't tenterhooks waiting for a reply, you know. Wow. But he was like, "Well, you know, if I write a book, you know, how soon can it get out there?" And he was asking me all these questions, and I was like, "Well, you got to write it first." You know, he was like, "How long will it take?" And I was like, "I don't know, it could take a year." A year? When you're that young, I might as well have said, you know, it'll take 20, 30 years. But it's just, but seeing that kind of up close is really interesting. Just that desire to like make a story and he's now on he kind of abandoned the first book, but he's now on the second book, which is a non-fiction book, so he's trying something different. But it is an absolute delight to see that. And I think at that age, I mean, like Justin was talking about his creative writing exercises. I mean, that was genius. I think kids in the primary school, they're so open and they're not afraid of being judged, and they've got crazy imaginations. And I think that's a really crucial time in the curriculum, just to encourage them.
Yeah, I don't think there's enough. I think I speak from my own experience. I was never really told. Even there was a book that we had to read in college, and it was more like post-war realistic book. And then over the years, I realized it's Gothic, it's Spanish Gothic, and I discovered that through Xavier Aldana's book. And I thought, well, and before reading him, I thought, well, all these elements here fit perfectly well the Gothic profile. Why nobody has ever told me this? Maybe because it's in Spain we have these curves with the Gothic. Now it's becoming more normalized, but things are not called Gothic still. I'm really angry about that, you know. And yeah, it's like this gap that I would have liked to have known about the Gothic and horror before I got to the age I'm now, or when I was at university. And thank God I did a degree. Otherwise, I would have never come across the Gothic literature. I would have always been stuck in the Guardian of the Crypt and watching Michael Jackson Thriller, you know. So I think that maybe new writers now, I don't know if they're more aware of this, but maybe through workshops or maybe through the curriculum even, just try to get the horror writer, not just writing, but the horror writer, which is more niche, maybe promote her more. So I don't know.
I mean, well, one of my friends actually did their English GCSE through like night school just recently, right? As like an adult learner, and they actually told me that they were told in class no genre fiction, so they were not allowed to write fantasy, horror, or sci-fi. And it's kind of interesting that why that would be kind of throttled. And I share a similar experience to yourself in that if I look at my GCSE and my A levels, you know, it was all James Joyce and Shakespeare and stuff like this, right? Which, you know, great, brilliant to learn on, but they weren't looking at the wider thing of, like, say, genre writing. Yeah. And then when I get into university, I'm doing English and creative studies, we start looking at different things. We did a Gothic and melodrama course, great, fantastic. You know, we had and that was because we had a guy there that was particularly into it. I expect Tracy's probably come across him in the years, but I couldn't know his name. But he was a huge Gothic kind of like fan and did all these lectures on it.
Was he William Hughes by any chance?
Yes, that's him. That's exactly him.
He's great. He's a real linchpin of the Gothic.
Yeah. So he taught me the Gothic and melodrama stuff. So that was great. But I'll tell you the one thing they didn't do to encourage writing more was that in this creative writing class, there was no module whatsoever, no learning about how you're going to make money doing this. It's all very well doing it, but unless you're a teacher teaching it, I couldn't see any other way of doing it. There should have, and nowadays, because the market is changed so much, because of the way of like how print on demand works, and just the way that books are sold in general, the publishing industry has been in flux for years, and it's been changing massively. But there's so much more opportunity, and so I think that there should be a way out of going, right, so this is you doing your writing. Now here's ways you can make money, whether that's in editing, in publishing, or if you're going to do writing, whether it's actually writing in magazines or newspapers, and how you're going to do journalistic stuff or in the creative stuff, then how are you going to do it? Where do you approach things? What do you do? What's the marketing? All that stuff should be covered in like a particular module, I think, and it would be so useful. Because I left university, I had no idea what to do with a degree whatsoever, So, and that's one of the reasons, like I said, that, I didn't do anything for 10 years, because even if I wanted to, it was like, well, what was the point? What would I do with it? I'd sit there and write a book and then it would sit on a computer. Just felt like a waste of time, really. So, but if you had that impetus to start with, of right, now this is what you've got to do now you're left. You can go, right, I've got to write to these people or look up this list of publishers and agents. That sort of thing I think would really help.
Yeah, well, maybe we need to have a private chat, the three of us, and maybe plot on this idea, because I can see that Tracy there, she has the writing workshops lined up more or less. That's something I would love her to do as well. I've been trying to invite Tracy to do things and courses. I'm just working my way through as well to give it the right platform, to treat her like a queen. And for Justin, the same thing is, if we could make a difference and we see the gap, hey, I'm all for it. I've got access to kids, and let's do something about it. So maybe we'll have a chat later about it. So I'm gonna go to now. We almost finished. I'm not gonna keep you any more longer. So it's 2 hours already talking about kids and something that you have in your company. So this one is the only one you've got, so we need to get more kids stuff there. I know it's Lovecraft books, but I'm gonna buy that. I told my son, "You're gonna read this," and he goes, "Okay." And I am definitely gonna buy it. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna give it to my kids, but I am thinking of using it for my classes. So beware.
Wow, fantastic.
Ali's on the on a target there again. Yeah, I think this is tell me a bit about this book and the idea behind, because there's a section that looks like it's waiting for more stories.
Yeah, so I mean, the reason why we did this was that so Lex H. Jones, the author, he had the book and he had the artwork already kind of commissioned, and he said to me, "Oh, I've got something really different than what you published, but would you be interested in it?" And he sent it over, and I looked at it and I loved it. And so it was like, well, yeah, let's put it out. It was something that I'd never done before, so I wanted to try something a bit different. We obviously put the kids bit on the bottom of the logo just so I can separate the brand up, because I don't want somebody picking that up and then picking up, say, like What Good Girls Do or Upon Waking, because, it's going to be vastly different things. So I needed to put that additional branding in there. But what I really enjoyed about it was when we put it out was the response we got. And it was something that I hadn't really thought about. I was just kind of excited. Oh, this is a new project. It was great. Yeah, let's do it because it's new. But then what obviously has happened is people have gone out and bought it. Some people bought it for themselves. Some people obviously gone out and bought it for their children. And what's brilliant is that there's these kids that are reading it. And so we've had this chat about how we've been really affected by stuff when we were younger. We talked about Thriller and like when you saw Salem's Lot when you were a kid, all that stuff. This stuff sticks with you, doesn't it? Right. So somewhere along the line, there's going to be some kids out there that's going to get that book and they're going to read it and they're going to love it. And what it's going to do is it's going to intrigue them to look into more kind of horror stuff, right? Like, what is this Cthulhu character? And then they start looking into that, and then they open themselves up into this other world of like, and that whole kind of gateway. Is that a good way of saying it? I guess gateway literature. Like, I mean, when I was a kid, we had the Ladybird books condensed down of Dracula and Frankenstein and that sort of thing. They're little hardback books. They had pictures in them, but they were the stories. And I had those when I was a kid. I had Hound of the Baskervilles, The Mummy, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I loved them. And that was kind of like part of my introduction and fascination with them. And those Goosebumps, I guess, is in point horror. They kind of then those have been around about a generation back. Is there stuff like that now? I don't really know. I don't know the market that well enough. But the more of that kind of stuff that we can kind of get out there and introduce the kids to the darker elements earlier, the more they can enjoy the horror as they go through their lives.
Indeed. So I don't know what you think, Tracy, because we normally don't talk about kids so much, but today they coming up. But would you be up for something like this? I know maybe it's not your market in kids, but the idea behind it.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, and I have written the middle grade novel, The Girl in the Fort,
that's true. Yes,
which is really aimed at the younger readership.
Yeah.
So, like, I think yes, because when I was a kid, I did all my formative reading. I would say that all my major influences were probably in place when I'd barely left my teens.
Yeah, so there's another big space here for us to pick on and to do something about it, definitely. Right, it's been great, but I think we're going to have to start finishing off because you guys must be tired as well. This is a little bit of contact support page. So for people who want to support you, to visit you. So if there are any other links or anything you want me to post later on the video, because I'm going to post this in YouTube. So any links, anything you want me to post there, just feel free.
That's perfect. Yeah.
We can find you there. And as always, I've got thousands of places where people can find me because I need to get my own promotion there. So I'm all over the place. So that's me. And yes, that's to learn more about the Gothic. I see, as you know, I'm trying to get the word out, to get people to know more about the Gothic because a lot of people don't really know. And it's sad. And
that is a wonderful mission.
Yeah.
I thoroughly endorse this.
It's a mission. I know you've been encouraging me to be part of this female horror writing thing as well. And I've been teased. And I started sending stories already, and I've even been nagging into Justin a little bit, see what he thinks. I'm really interested to know his opinion.
Yeah, no, I will. I'm going to sit down and read those. I've had such a bad. I suffer sometimes from migraines, and I had a huge migraine attack for 2 weeks at the beginning of this month. So I've stayed away from screens, and it's only this weekend where I've started to use the screens to look at. So I've not even been able to do any of my own writing or any reading of anybody's. But it's on the list. It's right near the top. So, yes, the next couple of weeks I'll be reading.
I'm like Tracy's little neighbor annoying you now. What do you think?
At least you're not texting and saying, I need feedback now.
No. I wouldn't do that. I might get impatient, but I wouldn't do that.
Anyway, I've read your work and I really enjoyed it. It's exactly the kind of quasi-supernatural, ghosty, gothic-y stuff that I adore. So
thank
put
you.
it out there. Keep putting it out there.
I will keep doing that. And, well, you are like two idols for me now. It's just references. And, I've been following you for a couple of years. More Tracy, but then Justin came, obviously, because he's the man behind Tracy with the book.
Stalking me.
It does sound so scary when you say that. Just because he's quite nice.
Even the picture I've got of him is like really serious in the dark. Oh dear. Well, I hope you have enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure.
Loved it.
Thank
Been
you
absolutely
so
brilliant.
much for having us on.
Thank you. And I'm going to try to pause the video just to have a chat with you outside the recording, but it could be that I took you out because I have this ability of closing it off completely. So don't take it personal. I'm going to try not to. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you again, another interview. Let's see what you've got planned for the future. And I'll keep my readers and my audience posted with any news from the Sinister Horror Company from Tracy. So thank you very much. And I'll see you soon.